Now we're talking about the difference between maladaptive coping skills and adaptive coping skills. Coping skill right here is right in the middle, right? So what I do with it makes it adaptive or maladaptive. Beating somebody up. Is it ever an adaptive coping skill? At some point as humans, we do have a fundamental right to protect ourselves and protect the ones that are close to us, right? And there are the strong who prey on the weak. And that's where the Second Amendment comes in, my right to keep and bear arms in an effort to try to equalize the evil that takes place in this world. So the universe has a tendency to be very black and white, right? But yet it's complex in nature because not everything falls perfectly in this black or white basket, right? Why do you think there's so much of this going on? This complex life becomes so difficult because on a fundamental basis, as humans, we are motivated by pleasure or pain. We like things that feel good. We don't like things that feel bad. But here's the problem. Some things that are pleasurable bring pain after the fact, and some things that are painful bring pleasure after the fact, right? So my journey from post-traumatic stress disorder was the deepest, darkest, most painful experience I have ever gone through. And it quite literally nearly cost me my life. I made the choice to die twice. I didn't want to die, but the emotional pain was so significant, I could not see an end. And in my maladaptive mind, the only way to end the pain was death. The universe stepped in, and I'm still here. Safety is primary. Have to have it. Because in a maladaptive environment, guess what comes next? Relationships. Maladaptive environments create maladaptive relationships, right? Maladaptive relationships destroy esteem. It makes it nearly impossible to develop the strength to look inward to this core to try to determine what I believe and whether or not it is in fact adaptive or maladaptive. Why then do humans do what they do? I promise you it's associated to one of these three needs. And the humans that are most successful are the ones that have these needs filled. Because if I feel safe, I can develop the type of relationships that help me to develop esteem. And this esteem over here is a concept of desire, purpose, and belief. If I want to do anything, doesn't matter what it is, I have to have a desire, I have to have a reason, and I have to believe that I can do it. In this class before, I've said straight up, once an addict, always an addict is fundamentally. It is one of the biggest farces. It is one of the biggest social faux pas that have ever existed. And the way that I like to explain this, okay? You guys with me on this? Row one, ain't nobody sitting here. Guess what? All of these students get A's. Row two, we got 2. Congratulations, y'all get B's. Row 3, C's get degrees, guys.
Yes.
Row 4, D's. Back row, F's. Got to take it again. If I graded this class in this fashion, what effort would any of you put into this class? And I'm talking about where you're sitting right now conclusively solidifies your grade. What effort are you going to put into this class?
I'll make an effort to get in the front seats.
No, it's done. We've already decided. You can't come from the back to the front. I've recorded it. Nice try. What effort are you going to put into this class? None. If I am told that once an addict, always an addict, and I have no control over my actions or my choices, what effort will I ever put in trying to overcome that if I'm told I can't do it? And I actually develop maladaptive core belief of I can't do it.
No effort.
I would put zero effort into it. There are some people who love the excuse of addiction. They love the excuse of the addiction because they don't want to stop. They don't want to stop because drugs are all they have that provide pleasure in their life. But the crap-tastic outcome of drug abuse is that drug that used to make you feel good loses its ability to make you feel good. It's empty. What lies at the end road of substance abuse is the exact same thing. It's an empty concept. I use it over and over and over again. I am chasing that original feeling because that is what I desperately need. That's what I desperately want. I want to feel good. But over here, it doesn't give it to me, right? I nearly succumb to the therapist telling me the post-traumatic stress disorder would be my burden for the remainder of my life. I fought against it for years and years and years and years. It's been a little over 2 years ago. I went from law enforcement into substance abuse treatment. And the interesting thing is, which started this hypothesis, which put me on a path of research, which developed into a philosophy, was what I noticed in that substance abuse treatment facility is that what I was going through with post-traumatic stress disorder was very similar to what people with addiction were going through. And when I say very similar, I'm talking quite nearly the same thing, but I was not addicted to drugs. Just over 2 years ago, I went from substance abuse treatment back to the Division of Juvenile Justice Services. I was triggering at work because use of force became associated with PTSD. I was working in secure care, and I was just sick, completely and totally sick of the crap that he'd been giving me the entire freaking shift. It was 15 minutes before bedtime, and I'm like, dude, go into your room. And your room is a cell. Think about it, the caged animal effect. Who wants to go into a concrete and steel cell? That's not the point. I was done with him. He flips, boom, that quick. Chucks an apple at me, which I dodge. Picks up a chair, pile drives, which I dodge. But I didn't see the fist that came up and tagged me square in the left eye. Didn't see it coming. So that use of force, and I actually got congratulated by my superiors that I didn't completely just kick it. I mean, I've never used unlawful force. I wasn't going to start then because I calmly helped take him to the ground and held him while we got him handcuffed. And I actually stopped at one point and because I feel myself welling up, I'm like, okay, what's up? And the dude standing next to me on one of the arms is like, why don't you go in the office? I'm like, great idea. Because I was like, well, I'm going to break this kid's arm, right? Go in the office, and that's when my eyes just start swelling shut. So I get 3 days off of work. because I can't see out of my eye. And my superiors are like, oh, you didn't kick his ass, you're an ex-cop. I'm like, duh, right? Here's the problem. I knew I had PTSD, but it was still fairly early on in the diagnosis. I'd had PTSD for at least, I was diagnosed July of 2011. I could identify symptoms as early as February of 2002. And so I lived with PTSD for almost 10 years without understanding what it was. I knew that there was this thing driving me. There was something going on. There was something wrong. I had no clue what it was. And so when I first got the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, it was initially, what's the word? At least it had a name, right? It was like validating almost, because at least it had a name. But then the problem of the problem continued. The fact that I was diagnosed didn't do anything about it. I started going to therapy. Years and years and years went to therapy, making some progress, but I was still triggering. And my triggers would put me from time to time so emotionally compromised that I was literally in a fetal position in the corner. And when I say fetal position in the corner, my worst triggers, my wife has never seen my worst triggers, thankfully. She saw one of them that was probably mid-scale, and it scared her to death. And I don't get violent. I don't get anything other than I present myself as a confident person, which for the most part I am. When I trigger, I'm the exact opposite. I'm a blubbering mess of feelings that are just cyclic and going all over the place. It's impossible to describe unless you've been there and felt it. The best thing that I can describe is I'm sitting there and it's welling up, and there's this explosion that literally of emotional force that just destroys the room, but yet I'm sitting there calm and serene, but inside it's a turmoil. At times it's impossible to control that, and it just knocks you down. So I get punched in the face. I get 3 days off of work. I don't necessarily realize or associate that I'm having these traumatic effects. And for the next 4 months, I'm not sleeping. I gotta go to work. I'm gonna go to work because by damn, this thing ain't gonna take over me. I will go to work. I will continue to work with the kid that punched me in the face and continue to be traumatized while I'm not sleeping for 4 months. And when I say not sleeping, one of the primary components of post-traumatic stress disorder is the amygdala is hijacked and your brain is literally fight or flight. So you're out in the woods, having a good time, big old gigantic grizzly bear comes lumbering into your camp. And we're not talking whether or not you got 357 Magnum or 44 Magnum, right? This is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about, even with the 44 Mag, which is what I would choose if I had to have a handgun to protect me against a grizzly bear, how well would you sleep that night? Even if you were clutching your 44 Mag, knowing a grizzly bear was in the area. Versus how well would you sleep if you got in your truck, drove down to town, and checked yourself into a hotel? The hijacked amygdala of post-traumatic stress disorder is literally the bear is present, it's there. You are waiting for the attack. You don't sleep during those type of things. You talk about hypervigilance, startled. My wife, at one point, I don't even know what brought it on, but I was driving down the street, and this was probably the closest thing to a panic attack I've ever had. Something, it was a loud noise, went over the freeway, and I literally went into this triggering mode, and she was snapping her gum, and it was literally like a gunshot. I mean, it would terrify me every time she popped her gum. Because little noises, hyper vigilant. I learned that if I wasn't sleeping and my startle response was off the charts, or stupid little things would startle me, I learned to associate that I was triggering and that I could use some coping skills to try to overcome that. But again, for 4 months, total hell. You talk about this right here, 100%. After being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, I spent 6 months, 10 out of 10 anxiety, 10 out of 10 depression. It was 3 years before I could recognize a reduction in that. Just a little over 2 years ago, I'm working in a facility and I'm triggering right and left. Like again, I'm calling in sick. I'm done with it. I actually called up the human resources and said, I'm done. I can't do this. You have to medically retire me. I can't do this. And the guy's like, oh, well, hold on. Let's get you some time off. You get back into therapy. I'm like, that's fine. That's great. I'm happy to. Give me some time off. Let's start with 30 days. That allowed me to go back to treatment, allowed me to go back to therapy a couple times a week. I think it'll be good. But just so you know, you're going to have to medically retire me. I can't do this. Because I've been battling it by that point for years, right? Go into therapy, and the therapist, it's a new therapist at this point. She's doing something called Emdr. And for the life of me, I can't remember what it is. It's like eye movement, something deregulated, something. The concept of it is that trauma hijacks the amygdala. The amygdala controls fight or flight, hijacks it, rewires it to the point where stupid things, right? I'm safe, but my brain is telling me I'm not safe. The whole point of EMDR is you're trying to reprogram the brain. You're trying to take back the amygdala. The way that it was done is I went on an awesome vacation to Hawaii with my wife, and I'm more of a Greece, Rome, Egyptian pyramids type of dude. I love history, and so if I'm talking a dream vacation, I'm going to go look at really old buildings and really old sculptures for a really long time. My wife is completely opposite. Give her a beach in the Caribbean someplace, right? So we're going to Hawaii, and I'm not really that excited about it because Hawaii is like low on my list. As it turns out, I mean, it was a fantastic vacation because Hawaii beaches are not like California beaches. California beaches are nothing short of miserable. Hawaii beaches are warm. The sand is not hot. I mean, it's a comfortable environment. And the water's warm, the whole 9 yards, right? So it's sunset, and I mean, this most spectacular view. And I'm standing in the water, and I've got my iPhone out there, and I'm kind of taking pictures and recording things and whatnot. And I'm just standing there, and I'm like, wow, this is like amazing. And as soon as I put my phone down, the setting sun is touching the water. Out comes this blue whale, full breach, right over the sun and comes back in. The most amazing thing I've ever seen in my whole entire life. And I was like, my face is like, oh. And I turned, and I'm like, did you see that? And my wife's like, her face is like, oh, and she saw it. The most amazing thing I've ever seen. My wife saw it. It's something that we shared together. So I sat down, and she's like, go to your happy place. That's my happy place. Beach, wife, whale, right? That's my happy place. I associate my happy place with the right and left movement. That's it. So for a week, I would visualize my happy place, and I would either tap my fingers or tap my toes, whatever, right and left. And so when we sat down and she would start processing, and we would go to that deep, dark place that everybody has, that everybody's terrified to go to, but what you have to go to in an effort to resolve it. When we tried to go there, every single time we tried to go, I would trigger off the charts. Emotionally, I would start to go all over the place, and I'm like, no, shut it down, we can't do it. Because I'm not going to go back to that place, right? I'm trying to exercise control over my emotion, because the primary feeling of a post-traumatic stress disorder trigger for me is I'm weak because I can't control my emotion. It always controls me. So I'm starting to trigger, and I go from absence of a trigger, 0 all the way up to a 10, right? 10 being the worst. I start immediately going 5 and 6. She stops. She does this thing right and left. Because I had associated that motion to my happy place, I went from 6 all the way back down to a 0. For the first time in 15 years. I walked out of her office feeling better than I'd ever felt in my entire life, thinking over and over and over again, it's safe to feel. For the first time in 15 years. That day, I recognized a significant reduction in this right here. Less than a week later, I'm driving down the street. Something's triggering me. It starts to build. And all of a sudden the thought hits. You didn't trigger. The trigger dissipated less than a week ago. You have control over this. You have control over this. Guess what happened to the trigger? Went away. The maladaptive core belief of it's not safe to feel was challenged by a therapist and EMDR, and I was able to replace with an adaptive core belief of it's safe to feel. I have control. But cognitive dissonance, or the concept of self-actualization, the concept of learning, what this means, I have evidence that I have control. And that is the reason why it meant something. And that was the reason why it was so significant. Is because I had evidence of control. So the crowning event of this particular lecture, what's wrong with me is the exact same thing that is wrong with you. Cognitive dissonance. Self-actualization is where I can challenge maladaptive core belief and change it into core belief. But I will never self-actualize if I don't have these needs filled. Drugs and crime, guys. Why do people involve themselves in crime? Why do people do the same things over and over again? Why do we have jails and prisons filled to the brim with people? Cognitive dissonance, which was created from a maladaptive environment. Maladaptive core belief that drives behavior. My actions and interactions with you can create cognitive dissonance. My job as a human being is to help fill one of these or all of these needs. If I do not, the end result is cognitive dissonance. And it's my fault because there's maladaptive behaviors. But your interactions with me are the exact same thing. You can do things for me that create cognitive dissonance. Except for self-actualization develops a strength to where I can exist, a strength inside to where I know my value. I have evidence of control. And I have strong adaptive connections. This provides for me a strength to exist in the turmoil of this world. To the point where I can work with kids and they can tell me to all day long, and it does not damage, it does not create cognitive dissonance, because I have developed a strength because of an adaptive environment. And my wife, primarily speaking, is the reason why I have done so well. Because she provided me these three things. But I've provided to her those three things. But sometimes we're so angry with each other we can't even be in the same room because we're both trying to figure this crap out. I've got PTSD. We're both, she's fixing to be 40, I'm 46, right? If you think dating when you're in your 20s is rough, try doing it in your 30s and 40s. It's miserable. There are 1,000 reasons why our marriage should have failed, but it didn't. Because the one thing that we had in common was that this relationship is worth compromise. This relationship is worth the pain that it takes to resolve. This relationship is worth trusting when a large portion of my life left me believing that I couldn't trust, right? Does that make sense? Thoughts on this, guys? Is it crap? Does it ring true? Yeah.
You should send that video to your wife to make her happy.
I tell her every single day of my life how precious she is to me. I will not waste a single day without letting her know how much I love her. She is the single greatest thing that has ever happened to me, and she knows it.
How long have you guys been married?
Just over 6 years. This is true. I know it's true. I've been trying to blow holes through it for years. I've got evidence to prove it. This is why humans do what humans do, good, bad, or otherwise. I present this to you. It's your job now to determine what you'll do with it. You're going to find little nuggets of truth. For instance, I'll give you this one, and this will help. Anxiety is evidence of fear. Depression is evidence of maladaptive thought. Anger is evidence of maladaptive action. And this actually came out of the political research that I discovered just actually not even a year ago. What this means is if I'm feeling anxiety, I'm afraid of something, period. What am I afraid of? Figure it out and the anxiety goes away. Resolve the maladaptive, right? Depression is associated to a maladaptive thought. My thought. If I'm walking around feeling depressed all the time, I'm probably focusing far too much on me as the problem. Conversely, if I'm walking around angry all the time, I'm probably focusing far too much on other people being the problem. So that doesn't mean that every time I'm angry, it's somebody else's fault. What we're talking about is the concept of persistent anger, persistent depression, persistent anxiety. So if I'm pissed off all the time, generally speaking, I'm pissed off at other people. What I should be doing is looking inside me for what I have control over. If I'm depressed all the time, I should probably start looking outside of me to determine who is causing me to devalue myself. Anxiety is associated to a fear. The core of this philosophy, the core of this belief speaks. Maladaptive core belief equals maladaptive behavior. You challenge and change the maladaptive core belief to adaptive core belief, the behavior goes away. What I'm saying is that if we healed addicts, they would no longer be addicts. If we provided safety to a person who is struggling with substances, if we gave them what they need, they could develop the ability to self-actualize, and the problem would go away. My evidence, 80% of my life is spent anxiety, depression, and anger free. And I was born anxious. What I have been doing over the last 15 years, and more specifically over the last 5 or 6 years, is I have been challenging maladaptive core belief, and I've been changing it into adaptive core belief. That doesn't mean I don't get angry. That doesn't mean I don't get anxious, and that doesn't mean I don't get depressed. But 80% of my life is lived controlling these emotions rather than these emotions controlling me. Does anybody have arguments against anything we've talked about? Every time I talk to somebody about this, it's the same result, it rings true. And I've got the empirical evidence to back it up. It's copyrighted. Now my job is to give it to the world. I still don't know how I'm going to do that yet, because you guys have to listen to me, because if you don't listen to me, your grade suffers. But what I found is there's a lot of people who aren't ready to hear this stuff. But here's the control that you have. You want to change somebody's life? You want to take somebody who's suffering and struggling? Create for them an environment of safety. Period. Guess what? It doesn't matter what they've done. To you, it doesn't matter anything. The past is the past. Get over it. You want to change a person? You want to save somebody's life? You show them consistent love. You show them consistent security. You show them consistent acceptance. You accept them for who they are right now, this very second. You help them to see the value that they have inside of them. When they try to push you away, you're not creating cognitive dissonance. You're not associating. You're not helping them to maintain maladaptive core belief, because you're treating them the same way that every other human have ever treated them. You're treating them differently. One person can save another person by providing for them what they need. It's hard. But isn't human life worth it? Yes, it is. 100%. Human life, period. Not male, not female, not black, white, or otherwise. Human life. Humanity. The human species. All of us, 100% of us on this planet. Every single person is worth it, because we are a miracle of nature. You wrap your head around that. How dare any one of us devalue what that is? How dare any one of us create any amount of this by treating somebody any way other than consistent love, consistent security, consistent acceptance? That's the mic drop. My goal is to save the world. The entire world. Every last single human. I have enough tenacity to do it all by myself if I have to. I would like some help. So, as compensation for me giving this to you, go forward and treat people the way that they deserve to be treated. So this world will be a better place. Period. Have a fantastic evening.